first, thank you very much, Alon and Amir, and all dealing with this project. To lead such a conference, it's difficult in general, but this year it was twice as hard. So I want to say thank you not only once, but again and again and again. People spoke before me, dealing with regulation, devoted to their job, and after me, other devoted regulatory officials that want to promote our industry. And everyone deals with a specific regulation. What I would like to add to this discourse is to talk about regulatory reform that is wide as an engine that will drive our industry forward. This broad reform is not mine. It's something that the State of Israel deals with for a long time. It started in 2011 as a response for the social uprising in Israel, or protest. We wanted to reduce the burden in the beginning, a way to reduce the costs, bureaucracy, but the more the time progressed and we continued to think about this idea of a broad reform, we understand that we need to deal not only with bureaucracy, not only with reducing regulation, but in making regulation precise, smarter, that helps us achieve our goals that we really want to achieve. And we need someone that will take care of this mission of making regulatory processes precise. And we reached 2021, a week ago, to a law that regulates everything. What does it do for our industry? I'll tell you about this. But first, I need to explain what the needs are of the regulation. And what the needs are for all the regulations. First, think how many times today people said the words innovation. First, we are all innovative in this industry, and it's not only that we are innovative. We are not only dealing with or relating to our environment, but creating a reality that is different from our environment. We are changing reality, and this creates a challenge for a regulator because the regulator deals to the reality that they live in. Because this doesn't relate always to technology, it blocks technology. The second thing, you saw and heard how important it is for our industry to be in touch with the wide world. It's true for many industries, it's very true for us. We need partners from abroad, we need scalability so our ideas will hold, will increase here in Israel. And not all regulators understand that we need to relate and speak in international norms. When we create norms that are detached from the world, it's like speaking Hebrew when the world is talking in English, and this is a shame. And it's a blockage. We bring to the table many solutions that launch our industry, create financial growth, financial, environmental. All these values are values that there are regulatory organizations like the Innovation Authority, that it is in their mandate and they want this, they want to promote it. But there are regulators that it is not in their mandate. They will have considerations, specifics that have to do with security or safety, but ultimately they need a broader mandate in regulation in order to consider other considerations that influence our ability to grow. The difficulty, as I said, is not only relating to one regulator, and the solution here, the thinking, the way of thought should change in a wide manner. I want to talk to you about a specific example to emphasize this issue, all these principles that I talked about. I will talk about 10A in the Israeli law of Section 10A that has to do with defense export. I hope this is not a trigger to any of you. It's a very difficult clause or difficult part of law because my clients even complain about this. What does it say? It states and it's inside a defense export control law, and it defines what is weapons in the state of Israel, combat equipment, and this clause states that all unmanned aircraft is weapons, is combat equipment. That means everything that you heard about today is combat equipment. This means we need to monitor it and control its export as we control weapons. So it's okay for some of the equipment that we talked about, but is it true for every drone? For my daughter's drone when I want to go abroad? Is it true for every subcomponent? Because out of this definition, there are other subcomponents that maybe are not weapons. This has to also do with knowledge, services. There is a part of the law that makes it very difficult for the civilian organizations, but not only. Let's talk about the difficulty that this creates for all. The first thing is an analog wording for a digital age. It was written in 2008 before Phantom 1 that was launched in the market. When you think about it, what did they think back then? They didn't think about precision agriculture. They didn't think about logistics carried out by drones, UAVs that are controlled in Israel through the cloud. It was a different world back then when this law was made. Second thing, it's not in line with any international standard and norm. In the world, regulators do not define independently what is considered combat equipment. There are international agreements or arrangements that help the regulators define what is combat equipment, what is dual-use equipment, and then monitor it accordingly. You will not find such a law with any international regulator. What makes our language here to Hebrew compared to English throughout the world, and nobody understands our norm, and it makes it hard for us to work with the rest of the world. It makes it difficult for us. For instance, an investor from abroad wants to invest, and he said, wait a second, is your equipment military? No, I say it's civilian. Wait a second, how is it defined in Israel? It's defined as combat equipment. It's a problem. In the mandate, according to the export defense, the export law, we have international commitments. What about the financial issue? These issues are not written into the law. And this also creates problems and friction. Something that I think is the most difficult, or among the most difficult, is that in the law itself, there is no process by which it must be re-examined. And so, the difficulty on the macro level is not when will we change this specific part of the law, but how will we enable or how we ensure that we will not have another Section 10A in 10 years from now. So these are broad problems, not only of this section, but problems that we must consider relating to the entire issue. So now we are aligning all the regulation with the new law, and it's awesome. It's going to launch productivity, but what does it mean relating to other broad regulatory issues? So first, the new law does define for the regulators that they need to look at social, financial considerations, even if they're not in their own law, and that is great, because that means that they have to relate to the added value that we bring. It also dictates that regulators need to look at norms outside of Israel to define the Israeli norms. It talks about the need to reassess regulation periodically. And there's also an authority that needs to think about regulatory processes and help each and every regulator understand the subject matter of, and have better processes. But this is still halfway, first, because it's not binding for all regulators, and second, there's the issue of innovation. How do we bridge the gap with innovation as far as regulators? This challenge is to work together with the regulators to create what we call the future-ready regulations. It's also a term that I did not make up. And the OECD, that is an international body that everyone thinks how to fine-tune regulation, and they helped us to to reach these insights as far as broad reforms that we are now implementing in the new law, they came out with a new instruction on how we help to grow innovative industries through regulation that is agile. If the processes of industry of things you create here are agile, it means that the regulation should also be agile to cope and keep up. Shorter cycles, we need to assess ourselves much more periodically. The OECD's rule did not only talk about agile regulation, but a few other tools that part of them we implement and some of them we should think about. First of all, I know that they changed the name. Naama is a nice name. I like the Naama initiative, so I put it here. I want to talk about Naama initiative for 10 seconds. Not only as a successful initiative in its own, but as a paradigm of how we can create regulatory change in a way that will enable innovation to be sustained. Because what Naama initiative does, it creates a sandbox for regulators that doesn't force the regulator to have a broad change. It enables them to try, to test. We see this from the recommendations from outside, from abroad, how we have to think how we work better between regulators here and abroad. We also need to think what gap, what space we give the regulators themselves to close the gap. We have still a way to go. But in conclusion, I want to say that the work should be in a collaborative manner. It must be combined because ultimately everything that we saw here today, and certainly cool and awesome and great, but what we saw today, first and foremost, goes to improve our lives. It's going to solve social problems, to solve infrastructure challenges, and these are in the mandate of our regulators. So the mission is to improve and align the regulation and have reforms to help our market with a national mission, also of the industry and also of the regulators. So good luck to all of us.